from the audience. All right, so we're rounding out the day today, and so I want to tell you a little story. If you were here for the last session, they really teed it up for me. So if you're watching this later from the video, go back and watch the deep dive into department data session as well, because that is a really good platform to move on to what I'm going to tell you today. So this is Kansas City, my humble little town of 470,000 people. It's our downtown area. I moved there in 2006, and Kansas City was beginning to have this incredible momentum in our community, and that momentum was echoed with what was happening in City Hall. And I've been lucky to work with the Office of Performance Management over the last 5 years. We're now a staff of 7. We share 2 staff members with our 311 call center, and that is a really important aspect of this story, so keep that in mind. And as you can see, our mission here is really about being customer-oriented. It's about making sure we're providing a good product to our internal customers, our departments. So this is kind of how we do that. I like this visualization because it's kind of organized chaos, and that is what our office feels like. So myself, my colleague Eric, the size of the bubble does not represent scope of responsibility, but you can see the other staff members in there as well, Kate, Bo, Jeananne, and Akeisha. And then some of the major buckets of responsibility we have. Surveys, performance improvement, budget aspects, working with our finance department, KCStat, department stat. Eric's main role is sort of open data analytics, and we're starting to move a little bit into the predictive analytics space, dipping our toe in that water. So a little bit about how performance management has evolved over time in Kansas City. So this bucket here, 2007 to 2009, is really when we mark the birth of the current program that we run. And as you can see in that first little box, the real beginning of our story is we implemented a 311 call center. And out of the call center came a just crap load of data, right? So citizens asking for services. And so we had at the time a city manager who said, hey, I want to start kind of looking at that. So he dedicated my team lead, Jeananne, and my colleague, Kate, to that purpose. Enter a new city manager who says, I want to keep doing that work, but I want to make it even more impactful. I want to invite the departments to look at this data, and we are going to come up with some solutions to problems that we identify. And I want to do that on a weekly basis, and I want you to bring all this really in the weeds data. And so that's where we consider our performance management office to have begun, because we focused and we honed around these performance management meetings that were primarily looking at 311 data. At the same time, 2010 to 2012, I joined the office, and Mayor Sly James also came into office in 2011, and he campaigned on this promise of bringing a CitiStat type approach to Kansas City as one of his major initiatives for efficiency. And so that was perfect timing, because we'd been doing some of this work internally to start driving a culture of data-driven management. And he said, let's do this, and we're going to turn it outward, and we're going to make it public. So these are going to be monthly meetings. They're going to be on TV. We're going to try to make everything as transparent as possible. And so that is what we did, and that's what we are still doing to this day with our KCStat program. In 2013, we launched our open data portal, and we then sort of put on top of that a dashboard, both powered by Socrata. And then really, really important to the story also is in that same time period, the City Council adopted a set of citywide priorities that was translated into a citywide business plan. And that business plan has formed the backbone of our KCStat meetings ever since then. So KCStat has this framework, and we report every month on a different goal and a set of objectives from those business plans. 2015 and 16, we launched a couple of academies to help expand the capacity within departments. And I think the real crux of what I'm going to talk about is this last orange box about how we've aligned our internal meetings, the performance management meetings, into something a lot more useful for our departments. So just to back up and tell you a little bit about what the difference is in these two very similar programs. So KCStat is all about accountability. It's about following that framework of the citywide business plan. It's about collaboration. It's getting staff around a table and saying, what are our shared issues? How can we fix them? And it is about public engagement. We, as I said, host these meetings. We live stream them. We put them out as archived video. We live tweet from the sessions, and we have the public dashboard. So just a way of pushing information out, but we also ask for feedback back in through our citywide business plan process. Performance management meetings, on the other hand, are really about that in-the-weeds internal operations. It's about efficiency, process improvement, customer service. We were born out of 311, so we obviously still have a really strong emphasis on making our services the best they can be for our customers. And then really importantly, exploration. These are the meetings that are with the city manager, department directors, division managers, staff of all levels to come in and say, okay, what if we looked at the data this way? What if we overlaid it on a map with this other data? What would happen? What does it look like? These things are not necessarily what we want to push out there or publicize yet, because we're still trying to figure it out internally. But what you notice is missing from this is a framework. These meetings, performance management meetings, up until about 18 months ago, were really sort of willy-nilly. They were born out of 311 data, but then we started talking about customer survey data and work order information and really any piece of data we could get our hands on, which in a lot of cases, it might be important to the department, it may not be important to the department. We were just sort of grappling to try to find the right pieces so we could provide value to our department customers. We felt that tension really early in our program. And so in 2013, we did something we call the great mistake of 2013, where we tried to align those internal, in-the-weeds, meaty meetings around the citywide business plan, right? It worked for KCStat, so why wouldn't we do it for this as well? Well, I think the true error in that way of thinking was that KCStat's based around these really high-level councilmatic goals, and the objectives are equally high level. These meetings are meant to be of value to our departments. They're meant to be exploratory. And so that gap could not be bridged. We spent that year really trying, and it just didn't really work out. And so we went back to that other model back in 2014 of going from meeting to meeting, finding the right data, thinking we'd found the right data, and sometimes just really working our butts off to create a visualization or an analysis that fell flat on its face when we got it in front of departments. And so performance management became department stat, as I said, about 18 months ago. And one of the main reasons we knew we needed to change is because by the end of 2015, I distinctly remember this month. This is October of 2015. And you can see that, I'm sure everyone's calendar is this busy, but one of the things that was really a problem for us is the brown circles represent performance management meetings. The green circles are KCStats. That's in 1 month, 3 staff people. I would guarantee if I went back and I looked at those brown circles, the slide decks that support them, it's not the quality, it's not the level of work that I want to provide. The analyses is probably so-so. So we were trying to do a lot of work, and from meeting to meeting, we would ask ourselves these questions. What are we going to talk about this time? What did we talk about last time? Should we do that same analysis again? Should we do something different? The worst thing, department director, can you send me that data by tomorrow? Because I really want to analyze it and have it ready for Wednesday. And this just wasn't working. We weren't getting the type of, we weren't providing the type of value to the departments that we needed to be. So enter the What Works Cities program. And I'd say What Works was really the catalyst that helped us, but these principles can be true whether you engage with What Works Cities or not. They came in and did 2 scopes of work for us. First was in the realm of open data, and that really brought to bear the principles of open data policy and other best practices. And for us, on my side of the department, we talked about the performance management system, and was it working? And were we making the maximum impact for the organization? And so they came in and they said a few really, really key things. First of all, you guys are doing too much. You need a framework for performance management, and you need a consistent brand. they really got on our case about this idea that we were calling this performance management meetings one thing, we were calling KCStat another thing, and we were applying a stat model to KCStat, but not to the performance management meetings in the same way. And so we said, okay, that's fair. We will alter our brand. We'll make it consistent. We'll make it fluid. So we moved everything to something stat. One of the things, oh, my category names aren't showing up. You know what, this actually happens a lot, people. I don't know, this is a thing we struggle with sometimes during KCStat. So point of this slide is, if you could see the category names and values, you would see that under the performance management, if you recall what I said about the goals of the programs are, over here with KCStat, the yellow one, the second yellow one is about collaboration. All right, so they get it. They know that that is one of the primary goals of KCStat. Over here, however, 41% and 34%, the first yellow and the green bar, said it's kind of about efficiency, it's kind of about process improvement. There was no strong consensus on what the primary goal of performance management meetings are. And that really, really raised a red flag for me. Then we see this data. And I would say What Work Cities did this for us so that people could feel like they could be a little more honest. You know, they may not tell me this to my face, but maybe they'd say it to the What Work Cities staff. So this really troubled me, that when you ask how important are performance management meetings for your internal management of your department, I can see why somebody might say KCStat's not that important for me managing my day-to-day operations. It has that opportunity, but I can see how coming together to talk about the high-level goals might not translate as easily. But performance management is all about helping you meet your operational goals, or that's what we thought it was. And to have the same number of people say minimally important is very important, and then 44% of people say, somewhat important, that was not really acceptable to me. In addition, when they asked how much time people were spending on these presentations, on gathering the data, on communicating with us, on average, almost 5 hours, and 6 different staff people were involved in these meetings. And we would ask people to come back to a performance management meeting once a quarter. So 4 times a year, departments are going through this. And that aggregates to enough time that I wanted to make sure we were doing something impactful. So with the help of What Work Cities and just kind of brainstorming on our own, we came up with a scheme down here, the arrow, where we asked the departments to go through and select priorities. What do you care about? We realized that in almost 7 years of running this program, we had never sat down with them and said, what's really important to you? We had changed the culture enough in Kansas City City Hall to be oriented toward data that people could see how a data-driven approach could be applied to their departments, but we just never ask, how do you want to do this? Then we asked them to create sets of bold goals around that. So 3 to 5 goals that you want to achieve over the next year to 2 years. Then we asked them to identify some metrics that would help us know whether we're meeting those goals. And what we've been doing ever since is monitoring and helping manage those goals in partnership with the department. And above, it's really, really important to note that prior to doing some of this work, we had been working with about 12 to 14 departments. So trying to really hit every department just a little bit and not really doing what the previous panel talked about, that deeper dive. We tried to do that with certain departments, but that left other departments really in the cold. And we'd ask them to come to these meetings, and we wouldn't have done the level of work that I really expect of myself. And so we scoped down to 6 departments. And those were departments who had either specifically said, no, I really want to keep doing this, or the city manager said, no, I really want them to keep doing this, or areas where we knew that there was specific data buy-in. 6 was still too many. So in 2017, we have scoped down to 4. And here they are: Park Stat, KCFD Stat, Neighborhood Stat, and Public Works Stat. And you will see the ones that are circled, those are my babies. And I am running those particular bold goals like I'm running projects. I'm able to apply some of the tools of project management, and I'm able to dive really deep. I'm able to go to the department and sit with them and talk with them more, because I've freed up more of my time by not trying to spread myself too thin. And that's true of all 4 of us in our office. we're able to take these 19 bold goals and divide them up and actually do some really significant work around each one of them. And I'd say these all roll up into these broader categories, and you can see there's some themes that sort of emerge when we started doing this type of work. Work environment, I'm sort of a glutton for punishment, so I've taken both work environment ones. We've got issues around capital and infrastructure. How do we manage our assets in the best way possible? We've got some issues around just really operational stuff like snow removal, and then we've got policy things as well, housing policy, communication plan. And then, of course, a smart city, trying to figure out what do we do with that. That's a scope in and of itself. So these are all really important, bold goals to the departments. And so it turns out when you make it relevant to the departments, they actually show up and they want to be in this conversation and they're giving you data. And we've really found that we've been able to bring our skills to bear and have someone meet us halfway who's really, really interested. And it's really helped us uncover a lot of kind of the data nerds throughout the city who were already putting effort and momentum into these particular areas in their department, and we're just able to add capacity to their existing efforts. So one of the things that really helped, or that we're able to now do and help, is because we have scoped down, we're able to bring some of the other tools we've been learning over the last few years to bear. So my colleague Eric, who's sitting over here in the front row, has been working on a specific data analytics program. He's had enough time to go to special like data science nerd school. I'm so glad he does, because I am not interested. And then also we've been able to partner again with What Works Cities to do some more predictive analytics stuff. We would not have been able to do any of that if we didn't free up more of our time. And also we've been doing some process improvements. We've all had training in Lean and other facilitation skills and other process improvement models. And we just didn't have time really to bring them to bear. And we also didn't have a framework to tell us, okay, where should we really dig in? And so we've been able to do that. And we've also been able to do some projects outside of even the scope of department stat, which has been really cool. We also have started talking more and more about sustainability of our program, and I think that's a national conversation. When there's a change of administration, we're a council manager form of government, I'm sure the manager's not going to be there forever. What happens if we get someone who's not interested in data-driven management? They exist out there, you know? I mean, I'm sure some of your jurisdictions have plenty of them. And what are we going to do if the central office goes away? Well, what really is of importance to us is to make sure that the framework that we've created is pushed out into the department. And moving to a department stat model has allowed us, as I said earlier, to do a lot more partnerships with staff members sitting in the operational departments. I've learned more about city operations by sitting down with those folks who are in it and are using the data and can help translate to me what a data set means, more than if I just sat in my office and looked at the data itself. It's also allowed us to advocate for more analytical skills. So we found those people in the departments that are doing some of this work, and in a lot of cases, some of them lacked those, you know, just basic data analysis resources. They didn't even know maybe where to turn for more resources or how to learn more. So we developed our Data Academy, which we've had our first cohort go through last fall. It was very successful. They have stayed in contact, and so it's actually created a nice network of data analysts and people interested in data-driven government throughout the organization. We also launched our pilot for the Kansas City Process Improvement Academy, and we will do another module of that coming up in the spring. So I would say my major advice, because I wish someone would have told me this when we started our program back in 2009, you got to start with a framework. KCStat, again, based on a framework. Performance management started to flounder because it had no framework. So having something to ground you and guide you is really, really important. Also getting disciplined. I don't think that we had a disciplined approach to the way we were doing performance management. And so by moving to a department stat model, we've been able then to really make our time valuable and stop stressing out over trying to create slide decks that no one's going to care about. And then, we still do plenty of that. And then never stop improving. I think that if you're in this room, you already buy into that philosophy. But as a concrete example, after our work with Department Stat was over, we realized that there was still something wrong with KCStat. We thought that that was fine, except then we started talking about, well, you know what, we could really do a lot better by taking that bold goal philosophy and dividing up ownership of the different KC stats. So we've done that. We want to encourage the goal owners to take more responsibility, to get involved in the conversation earlier on than the 2 weeks prior to the KC stat session when we frantically send out an email saying we need data. So we've started having more front-end conversations with that staff to make sure that we're capturing everything that they want to talk about underneath the goals and objectives of the citywide business plan. We've also, and it's not up here, but we've instituted sort of a after-action meeting for KCStat. So after each KCStat, we sit down and we debrief about what are the key points. We've started a memo that we really use more for ourselves, but also as another transparency mechanism to say, here are the key discussion points, and here are the follow-up items, and this is what we're going to bring to the next KCStat. So now I know when I go to develop a KCStat, I can pull that memo out and say, okay, good, the mayor asked us to look at this. That's what we're going to talk about, and there's not as much of a struggle as there had been in the past. And then much like with Department Stat, we have cut content to the most relevant data and information. We let KCStat go a little too far afield. Yes, it's based on citywide business plan, but maybe it would happen upon a cool data set, or we would read something and say, you know what, why don't we bring that to the table? Or we'd hear about another city doing something. So we'd spend 15 minutes talking about what another city was doing with their data, which is cool, but we had sort of lost the spirit of KCStat in the process. And so we've refocused and we've rehoned that effort. Turns out in the last, since the beginning of this calendar year when we made these major changes, between Department Stat and KCStat, I feel a lot more disciplined. I feel like we are continuously ebbing and flowing, and I'm able to take a little bit of a break on the months I don't have a KCStat, which frees me out to go out and talk, or frees me up to talk to my departments, to think about how would I improve the park's work environment. And I think that that's a really, really important part of our evolution as an office, and I think that we will continue to see the fruits from that as the year goes on. And so with that, I will open it up for any questions.
How did you communicate that you were changing your KCStat models to the departments, and how did your management within the mayor's office deal with that change?
Yeah, so we actually wrote a memo/email to the city manager and said, hey, we're going to change. And he didn't write back and say no, so we went ahead and moved forward. And we did a series of presentations for our department directors. They have a forum with the city manager once a month. And we went there and we said, here's what we're thinking, give us any feedback. Here are the departments we're going to partner with, and here's the ones we're not. Believe it or not, we actually had a department email us later and say, why did you kick us out? We want to be a part of it. So they'll come back in the fold eventually. But they were already doing a lot of really good work with data anyway, so we didn't feel like our added capacity would be that important to them. But for the most part, people were ready to go along with this, because I think there was enough. Toward the end of 2015, there was enough disgruntled attitudes toward performance management that this was a welcome change for a lot of people.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, so that was part of my question, right? So how do you get from 12 to 4? But then for that fifth department, is there kind of an internal thought around, well, okay, Parks is good enough to now we can let them get back out there and then bring in number 5? How are you all thinking about getting back to those other departments?
Yeah, so I would say one of the reasons that one of the departments, when we went from 6 to 4, was sort of put to the side a little. That sounds harsh, but they're actually in the middle. It's our city planning and development department. They're in the middle of an upgrade to their permitting system. And so we would just go back to them. It was so frustrating for us and them, and say, we need this data. And they'd say, that old software system runs on a mainframe. It can't give you that data. And so we said, you know what, why don't we come back to you once you get this software implemented. And so it's likely that we will bring them back in next year if they are interested in that. And I would say it'll be situations like that, where if we feel like Parks has moved on to a point that maybe they don't need the same level of attention, we might put them to maybe once a year, a meeting just to come in and touch base and take someone else into the department stat model. We've actually done that with our water services department. Over time, we were having them come quarterly, and they've created this entire excellent internal data-driven management system. And so we just have them come once during the summer between a lull and the other meetings, report out on what they're doing, and then they also have responsibilities within the KCStat framework. So we do have a precedent for sort of pushing people off into the world to do their thing. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You shared a lot about the, I guess, evolution of this process. Looking back, what would be, I guess, maybe one or a couple of the things you wish you knew when you started that you learned along the way that would have made it a little bit easier to do, or would have been a great thing for someone else to learn as they're trying to start this initiative?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think if we would have had a framework early on, it would have caused us, or it would have kept us from having a lot of stress. If we would have had much more defined areas that we were looking at, and we had that based on what the department's needs were, I think that would have been really key. Documentation of how we've evolved, that's still not something we really have. And I think looking back, I would have told myself, a decade ago, start making sure you're creating documentation for what you're doing and why you're doing it, and why you have one department and not another. And so someday we're going to have to do that work. And I wish I would have been doing it all along. Yeah. Yeah.
For the 19 goals that you're focused on now, do you have timelines attached to those, or are they kind of open-ended, or?
Yeah, we don't have them yet. Those are sort of defined by just kind of what the rhythm of the department is. With my work environment stuff, that is a carryover from last year for our fire department. And our goal last year, honestly, was to deploy a survey inside their department. And so we accomplished that. So kind of, check mark, we did that. And now it's the hard part of implementing that. And that's kind of an open-ended question. And several of them are like that. We're just going to leave them open until we feel like, or the department feels like we've made some progress. There are other things that I think will have a more definite end point. We have a goal around improving sidewalks. We have an opportunity in April. We've got a bond election that will do a lot of sidewalk work. And so that maybe changes the scope of that particular bold goal and moves it into more of a management of how well are we doing on implementing the bond. So, yeah.
Oh, so under your KCStat, when you talked about the redesign and refocus, can you expand a little more when you said encourage more ownership by goal owners? Does that mean, kind of having them validate the data, compile and scrub? What does that mean?
Yeah, so really that's having them help us craft the narrative around what we're talking about. As I said, those goals and objectives are high enough level that they still need a nice, concise story placed around them. And so we've asked all the goal owners to really help us craft that and tell us what data is actually telling that story. I think we did a lot of work where we would bring some data to the table that we thought was relevant, and we'd get it to the table and we'd have a goal owner say, I don't actually think that's not part of the story I'm out telling as an assistant city manager or as a department director. And so we've started looping them in a lot earlier to help us craft the narrative. Yeah.
So I have a couple of different questions. So when you're working with the departments, are you trying to develop any sort of consistent data standards? So when Parks measures employee satisfaction, is that the same measurement that's being used for KCFD or across the board?
Yeah, so in that particular instance, yes, because we actually administer the survey. So that's part of our scope of work is our citizen survey, an internal services survey, and an employee survey. And so we do it at a central level. KCFD actually took that existing survey and pared it down a lot, worked with their union to deploy it because they thought they would get, and they did, get a lot more participation if it came through them than through the city manager's office. But in some cases like that, yes, we have a very consistent data source, and so we're able to apply it to all our departments. Otherwise, it's a little bit one-off. 301 data obviously also has that consistency. It all comes through our call center and is in our customer relationship management software. So there are some data sources we look at pretty consistently that are standard across everyone. And then, of course, there's the one-off information that comes out of their enterprise systems that are really unique to their operations.
And then whenever you're working with these departments, are you also working to make these measures more visible within the department so that they can actually see their progress as it's happening and it's out in the open?
Yeah, you know what? That's actually, I saw a presentation earlier where it really brought into focus. We have our KCStat dashboard, but we don't have an internal facing dashboard to do just that. And I think that's probably a missing piece from our new evolution. So I appreciate that question. That's something we need to work on.
Great. One last thing to close it out.
Oh, come on, Roche.
Make it a good one.
So what is your secret sauce with getting departments to share data? Do you just kick the door in and demand data using an ordinance? Like, how do they, how do you sweet
I send my data goons, and they strong arm. No, obviously you can answer this question a lot better than I. But I actually think it's all relationships. That's all this work is building good relationships. And if they know that you are going to use their data for good, or if you're going to use it to help them improve something, they're a lot more willing to give it to you. And I think that we have definitely found those areas where we are the furthest down the road and we're the most mature in our ability to assist, and then their ability to use our insights or come up with their own insights are in the places where we've just developed really strong working relationships with the analysts and the staff there. Thank you, Eric. All right, any more? All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.